Welcome to today's episode of Movies About Miserable People Whose Downfall Comes as a Result of Their Own Narcissistic Ambitions. Tar is a character study of an egotistical conductor who deceives and manipulates the people around her in order to maintain her powerful institutional status. She is not a likable protagonist. She's that professor who talks down to her students, and no matter how knowledgeable or compassionate about music she is, there's condescension in her tone. You can tell she loves nothing more than the sound of her own voice, that she finds nothing more brilliant than her own ideas, that she gets high off the smell of her own farts.
However, unlike a clock, sometimes my second hand stops, which means that time stops.
She just can't accept that music students these days aren't very interested in Bach.
You're not into Bach. Oh, Max.
Tar isn't about the plot as much as it is about characters and themes. Mainstream moviegoers are going to find this movie very boring, if they even decide to bother with it at all. Cate Blanchett gives an incredibly nuanced performance. She completely embodies the character, the definition of a girl boss. She's shattered the glass ceiling, yet she reinforces patriarchal power structures while abusing her position of privilege in the same way as men traditionally have. This has led to the film being accused of being anti-woman by a female conductor, Maren Alsop, who, like the fictional Lydia Tarr, was also a student of Leonard Bernstein and attended Juilliard. The film seems to loosely base its character on a real person who has never had allegations of sexual misconduct, and perhaps the script could have done more to distance itself from a real-life conductor, but I would argue that Tar is not attacking women. It's showing that there is a systemic protection of abusers in place, regardless of gender or sexuality. Lydia Tarr's status in her field is at risk, and she deletes emails to absolve herself of any attachment to the death of one of her former students, who she first groomed and then blacklisted from the job market. Grooming has become a really loaded term. When I say that Lydia Tarr groomed one of her students, I mean that she took one of her star pupils, bought her gifts, took her out for meals, and gave her special treatment, all with the intentions of forming a romantic relationship. She forces a man out of his job in order to advance a new student who she is enamored with. Her decisions are driven by self-interest, and her attitude is one of arrogance, but the audience understands her motivations. Lydia Tarr is a heavily flawed protagonist, but she's not framed as a villain. She's humanized with scenes that show the love she has for her daughter. Tar actually begins with the credits. After the cold open, you have to watch 4 minutes of credits before the movie begins, and the font is tiny. It's as if the filmmakers are trolling us. This is followed by a long list of accolades intended to prove the brilliance of Lydia Tarr. This is all cross-cut with her clothes being handmade, communicating her social status. The student whose life Lydia Tarr ruined is in the audience, though we never see her face. This student committed suicide off camera, which is the most pivotal point of the movie. It's the action that sends its protagonist's life into a downward spiral. This is not meant to downplay the significance of the victim, it's meant to show that victims are forgotten about while abusers are remembered. The conductor is in a position of complete control. They decide what pace and intensity will be used when the music stops and starts. Her career path reflects her personality. Her approach is more authoritarian than democratic. Lydia ends up talking about the concept of love and the life of Gustav Mahler, but the irony of this scene is revealed later when we learn more about the history of Lydia's romantic relationships. Given that the cold open, the credits, and this interview take up the first 17 minutes of the movie, I understand why many viewers consider this film a slog. However, the idea of the movie is to study a brilliant sociopath, and the scenes take as long as they need to provide a realistic characterization. One of the pivotal scenes early in the film is one in which Lydia challenges one of her students, calling him out in front of the class in a way that is embarrassing and degrading. It's not that she isn't making a good point when she tells the student to not be so eager to be offended, but she singles out the student, who is obviously nervous, telling him bluntly that the architect of his soul is social media. She's essentially accusing him of losing his individuality in the hive mind of the eternally online. She loses her composure and later cell phone footage of the classroom scene is clipped together to make her appear racist. This is a fascinating scene because it plays out so realistically. It's the kind of contentious situation that would play out between a student and teacher when it comes to generational conflict. The student doesn't appreciate Bach because of racial and gender identity, while the teacher is arguing for Bach's historical importance. She becomes frustrated with the obstinance of her student and reduces herself to shaming him in front of the class, the same tactic implemented by purveyors of cancel culture. Lydia'S narcissism is subtly highlighted by the amount of time she spends in front of mirrors throughout the film. The cinematography is careful and precise. There's a shot where her image is reflected out into infinity, displaying her extreme egotism. In her eyes, the world is just an endless image of her own reflection. The people around her are mechanisms to be manipulated in order for her to maintain the status quo. The story of the film is one of a downfall. Some viewers might construe this film as a criticism of cancel culture, but that's because the film merely presents a story without judging its lead character. I would argue that the film actually displays that cancel culture is a misleading term, as Lydia Tarr is brought down after an abuse of power, but finds another career conducting video game music and continues to exemplify the same behaviors in a different venue. The powerful don't get cancelled as much as they are shifted around into other industries where they can begin their predatory behavior all over again, as she is now reduced to picking out girls from a brothel rather than the orchestra pit. I'll give Tar a 9 out of 10. The acting is first class, and there are subtle complexities to the filmmaking which I enjoy from a production standpoint. The themes are presented in a manner in which the viewer can draw their own interpretation of meaning, which I prefer over a film that exists to provide a direct message. This one also appeals to me because I'm a musician, and I find it interesting to hear about the inspiration behind the works of Mahler and whether or not Beethoven ripped off Mozart.
Everyone to a man knows Mozart's name.
Well, I don't, so there goes that theory.
This leads us into the Banshees of Inisherin, where music also plays a key role in the film. There's a scene with the Irish folk ballad I'm a Man You Don't Meet Every Day, though Carter Burwell's score is not one of traditional Irish music. Like the film itself, the score begins as light-hearted, later descending into sadness. Director Martin McDonagh's debut dark comedy In Bruges saw Farrell and Gleeson as a pair of hitmen, one who is given the task of killing the other. The actors are teamed up here again for a film that is more melancholic and reflective. Non-Irish viewers might complain about not being able to understand what the characters are saying, while Irish viewers might find these characters to embody Irish stereotypes.
Have you been rowing?
I don't think we've been rowing.
Sounds like you've been rowing.
It does sound like we've been rowing.
Personally, I never had a problem understanding the dialogue, and as an American viewer, I'm not an expert on how realistically this portrays Irish rural life in the 1920s. Brendan Gleeson's character Calm and Colin Farrell's character Pádraic are friends who live on an island off the coast of Ireland. The year is 1923, and there's not much to do but get drunk and hang out with your donkey. The landscapes are beautiful to look at, though. Calm is an intellectual musician who's growing older and feels that he's running out of time. He wants to write a piece of music that people will remember him by. One day he tells Pádraic that he doesn't want to see him anymore. His reason being that Pádraic is a simple, down-to-earth dullard who gets in the way of his musical ambitions.
He's dull.
But he's always been dull.
The film begins as a bleak comedy. It's humorous how hard it is for Pádraic to understand that Calm can't stand him. Pádraic's insistence eventually leads Calm to threaten him with acts of self-mutilation. He will cut off a finger every time Pádraic bothers him. Even after Calm cuts off one of his own fingers, Pádraic approaches him yet again. It begins by highlighting the absurdity of human behavior. As the film progresses, the dark humor dissipates, and it becomes a full-on tragedy. Dominic, in an excellent performance by Barry Keoghan, is a young man even more naive than Pádraic. His abusive father is an authority figure in the town, and Pádraic is a protector for Dominic. As Calm and Pádraic's feud escalates, Dominic loses faith in Pádraic, whose sister Siobhan leaves the town for a better life. The remaining male characters all end up falling into despair. The Banshees of Inisherin is about men who refuse to confront their emotions. Calm is clearly suffering from depression, yet refuses to admit it. Refusal to deal with his depression results in several acts of self-harm that have repercussions for Pádraic and Dominic. Calm eventually cuts all the fingers off of one hand. Ironic, considering his reason for ending his friendship with Pádraic was that he wanted to leave behind a legacy through his music.
Do you know who we remember for how nice they was in the 17th century?
Who?
Absolutely no one.
The piece of music he is writing is called The Banshees of Inisherin. Banshees are symbolic of death, though the character that ends up dying is the most innocent one, Dominic. At the end of the film, he's found floating in the river. Pádraic tells his sister Siobhan, played by Carrie Condon, that it was an accident, but the audience understands that he took his own life. The last time Siobhan saw Dominic, he was professing his love for her in a nervous and awkward manner. In this letter to Siobhan, Pádraic gives many misleading statements. The audience is never shown Siobhan's reaction to the news. The film ends with neither lead character acknowledging that Dominic's death was a result of a chain of actions which they put into place. Without the balance of the feminine perspective, the men spin out of control. The actions of the older men have a negative impact on the future generation. Pádraic's donkey dies because it chokes on one of Colm's fingers that he left behind for Pádraic. Pádraic's innocence and kindness is extinguished, with Dominic's death occurring soon after. The shot at the end in which Pádraic gazes at Colm through the window of the burning house mirrors the opening shot. The Irish Civil War lingers in the background of the film, the endless cycle of war expressed in these repetitions. Before Pádraic burns down Colm's house with him inside, he smashes a mirror, splintering his reflection. As death is a major theme of the film, religion and the afterlife is also a key point. Much of the score has a celestial quality to it, and Christian imagery is prevalent. There are two scenes in the film in which Colm confesses to the local priest. The first is more humorous as the priest curses Colm out for his insensitivity, while in the second, the priest pities Colm for refusal to seek help for his mental health issues. In the final shot of the film, the camera ascends as clouds hang over the island, the characters unwilling to leave the desolation of their own making. This is preceded by a shot where an old woman who embodies a mysterious quality watches over the characters. She warns of death earlier in the film, and is the one who discovers Dominic's body. It's said that there are no banshees on the fictional island of Inisherin, though this woman certainly seems to represent one. The metaphors of the Banshees of Inisherin resounded with me, such as the idea that mental health for men is stigmatized and leads to increased suffering, or that wars and violence are the result of men who have destroyed the kindness in themselves. The Banshees of Inisherin earns a 9 out of 10. It's an oddly humorous tale that becomes a somber reflection of ourselves, with a great dramatic arc for Colin Farrell's character. It's an even better performance than when he played the Penguin in The Batman, but there won't be a TV spin-off for the Banshees of Inisherin, which technically makes it a better movie.